Hellboy attack! Let's go! Doesn't this mask look amazing? I can't see out the eye holes, bro.
Who is Hellboy?
What's Hellboy about? Hellboy.
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 Hellboy. Hellboy.
Hellboy.
Hellboy. The one and only Hellboy.
So who is Hellboy? He's a half-demon summoned by literal Nazis that ends up beating the living daylights out of every evil thing ever conceived, including Nazis. And today we're talking about the movies and everything else. Writing the script for this video was a strange process for me. Initially, I didn't know much about Hellboy. I was kind of apathetic towards the character. I saw about an hour of one movie before, a long time ago, but that was basically the extent of everything I knew about Hellboy. Out of nowhere, the movie Hellboy the Crooked Man gets announced, and it got pretty bad reviews. And I knew the 2019 Hellboy didn't get great reviews either, so I thought it would be a fun idea to dive deep into these movies and find out why the early movies were so well received while the later ones weren't. I had a general sense of who the character was, but I had never read the comics, and I just wanted to learn more about Hellboy. Plus, analyzing a character that you're not too familiar with is a lot more fun during the research process for me. What I didn't foresee was that through doing research for this video, I'd become a full-fledged Hellboy fan. And I mean a super fan, by the way. I purchased and read basically all of the comics based on the character. I bought merch that I'll be wearing throughout this video. I even got a Hellboy mug. I bought and played the video games based on him. I even went back to Injustice 2 just so I could play as him. I bought action figures. The little homies are hanging out behind me. My life has been nothing but Hellboy for months. So this video is... Hello there. I'm interrupting your video very quickly to tell you that these Hellboy tees are only available for 7 days over at alienclothing.com. That's AYYLIEN clothing.com. It's a completely original design. At the very bottom of the tee, you can see that there's a quote here. It's one of my favorite quotes from the comic books. So yeah, if you're a fan of Hellboy and want to show it off and you like this shirt, go to alienclothing.com and get yourself one. They're only available for 7 days. Thanks. If you're a nerd like I am, then you definitely need to stop using whatever browser you're using and start using Opera GX. If you're unsure what Opera GX is an extremely smart and customizable web browser. Think deeper personalization, design updates, and an expanded universe of mods and modding options. This browser can be customized to match your style, whatever that may be. It has a built-in ad blocker, built-in VPN, and a forced dark mode that makes browsing easier on your eyes. If you know anything about me or my channel, then you know I'm a huge fan of horror, and Opera GX has a bunch of official and user-generated horror mods with themes like Resident Evil 4, Dead by Daylight, Halloween 2023, and Silent Hill 2. Opera GX even has dedicated wallpapers that are animated. They react to your actions in the browser, and they're super cool. It has built-in background music, keyboard sounds, customizable opening and closing tab sounds, custom splash screens, which is the animation that plays when you open the browser, custom user interface icons, custom GX icons, and even shaders that change your entire screen. Like if you want to have a cool effect like cyberpsychosis or you want to look cracked. Opera GX also has a quick import tool, which allows you to import your data from one browser to Opera GX. It makes switching over very simple. So stop using your boring browser and download Opera GX today. Click the link at the top of the description to give the best browser for gaming enthusiasts a try. And it's free. Thank you so much to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Now back to the review. So this video is no longer from the perspective of an outsider looking in. I'm definitely reviewing these movies as a legitimate fan, as it should be, you know? This is one of the best things about my job, finding new interests and experiencing cool new stories. So if it wasn't obvious, I love the world of Hellboy. I love how the creator Mike Mignola mixes history with fantasy and popular mythical creatures and cosmic horror and folklore. The comics will constantly reference historical figures like Rasputin, the Russian mystic, for example. Hellboy references historical events and sometimes gives them a fantastical twist. I love all the fun characters and villains he encounters throughout his journeys, whether they be witches, vampires, werewolves, Nazis, giants, cosmic entities, or fish dudes.
Dracula was my favorite book. I was really into Conan, which kind of opened my eyes to all the weird tales era, which, led to Lovecraft and everything else.
I love the hilarious idea of a literal devil man finding Nazis so foul that he goes around beating the shit out of them with his giant fist. I also find Hellboy's design so unique and cool, with his cut down horn circles on his forehead that complement the circles on his giant fist. I like his ape-like build and appearance, how he's not like your stereotypical superhero who's super attractive. They made him bald but only gave him hair that wraps around the side, and they gave him a man bun as well.
What the hell is even that?
I really like his one giant fist, or right hand of doom, and his gigantic revolver or gun that he wields in his left hand, which Guillermo del Toro's film dubbed the Good Samaritan. He's got this like huge jaw and a severe underbite. He's almost always smoking a cigar or a cigarette. He hardly ever wears an undershirt, but he always wears his trench coat. Gotta make sure to show off those red pecs and six-pack. He's kind of got this awkward looking body. He's got this super long torso, but he also doesn't really struggle to get women. It's kind of strange how women just fall for this guy. There's an entire story about how a woman falls for him. Maybe because he's not like a stereotypical man, you know? Women are scared of men. They'd rather choose the bear, or in this case, the Hellboy. Also, throughout the comics, he has a tendency to have long, thoughtful chats with people who turn out to be long dead. His powers are kind of strange, because he's not super powerful. He can punch pretty hard, and he's practically immortal. He's kind of like One Punch Man if you nerfed him into the ground. It's even said in the comics that he's not all that accurate with his gun, and he's not all that intelligent either. He just wanders into awful situations and hopes for the best. I love Hellboy's calm, badass demeanor when crazy shit is going on around him, and how that can be used for comedic effect. I love his short, quippy, and sarcastic responses to literal godlike entities or armies. This guy will watch a skyscraper-sized Lovecraftian worm emerge from out of nowhere, and all he'll say is, "Jeez." He simply can't be bothered. He either beats the shit out of them or wants to be left alone. You could say he has super strength and a healing factor, but his true superpower is that he's fearless. In the Darkness Calls run, he fights an entire army of the dead by himself with full confidence he'll win. Remember how he said he wasn't all that intelligent? He fights Lovecraftian entities and just hopes for the best. And even when he gets his ass kicked, which happens often, he doesn't pout, he takes it on the chin and gets annoyed when the bad guy goes on a long tangent about whatever bullshit he couldn't care less about. After writing my review for the first two Del Toro movies, both of which I adored by the way, I felt almost apprehensive to review the next two due to their bad reviews. I didn't want this character that I had recently fallen in love with tarnished, but I started down this road, so I had to finish it. That and reviewing shitty movies for you guys can be fun, even if it's at the expense of something I like. Yes, I'm gonna be reviewing the new Venom movie too, this year, at some point. I talk about a lot of stuff in this video, so I separate it into segments with timestamps. Feel free to jump around. Hellboy was created by a man named Mike Mignola.
After Marvel and DC, the largest extended comic book universe is the Mignolaverse.
Mignola.
Mignolaverse.
The character was initially thought up at Great Salt Lake Comic-Con on a convention program book. Mike wasn't trying to create a character then, he just drew a silly monster. The silly original version of Hellboy has since been named Mondo, but it was also the birth of the name Hellboy. Mignola thought about creating a paranormal fighting detective superhero team, but later scrapped the idea to mostly focus on a single character that sometimes works with others, and he did just that. Hellboy is introduced to and involved with an agency called the BPRD, or the Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense. Here's Mignola's first attempt at a promo poster for Hellboy, made in 1993. There were two short stories used to promote Hellboy's first standalone comic book. One is Hellboy fighting a gorilla, so basically two gorillas fighting, and the second one has him fight a dog, like a literal dog, and it grows into a gigantic dog. So he basically fights Clifford, which is weird because in this comic, he's the red one. Later, Hellboy was fully realized in his own comic book, Seed of Destruction. Mike Mignola's art style is very unique. It utilizes a lot of flat colors with minimal detailing and sharp corners.
He wasn't using like the typical shapes that you would see in a comics, the way a mouth was formed the rings under the eyes. Nobody else was doing that stuff.
The shadows are stark black. What's lost in detail in his art is gained in a dark, simplistic, unique style that makes Hellboy stand out amongst all the other comics. His style wasn't my favorite at first because I was so used to the standard comic book style, you know, like Todd McFarlane. But I found that as I kept reading the comics, I quickly fell in love with Mignola's style and his storytelling. I do prefer Duncan Fegredo's artwork to Mignola's personally, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Mignola's art because Hellboy's main comic book run starts and ends with it. So yeah, the comics are awesome. They're exciting, they can be funny at times, whether it be through witty one-liners from Hellboy or through the antagonist Rasputin becoming so upset with his followers that he blinds one, which makes him stumble into a big red button that blows up their entire facility. Throughout the books, Hellboy is constantly trying to outrun his destiny. He's destined to be the harbinger of the apocalypse, but he just kind of tries to ignore that. Like, if I just close my eyes and walk away.
There's no pretense about him. He really would rather not go save the world.
He also becomes King of England. Kind of random, but yeah. In Darkness Calls, there's one of the smallest panels I've ever seen in a comic book. It's literally the size of a dime. In that same run, the witch Baba Yaga makes out with a goat, and there's lots of tongue. So that's weird. There's a funny moment when Hellboy is asked by this same witch for his eye, because something happened earlier where he took out her eye and she wants a new one. And in return for Hellboy's eye, she'll bring him where he needs to go. And without hesitation, he's like, sure. He rips out his eye and gives it to her. My one complaint with the comics is that too often Hellboy survives encounters due to some outside random intervening force. Some could say the hand of destiny is intervening every time or something, but it happens too often, I think. So I'm gonna briefly talk about the games. The first one is Hellboy Asylum Seeker for the PS1. This game sucks ass. Hellboy's character model is an abomination. The combat is laughable, and the sound design is just silly. I didn't bother playing much of this game.
What happened in there?
Giant bird women. I hate them.
I did, however, beat the next two games. The first of which is Hellboy The Signs of Evil for the PS3. This game is better than Asylum Seeker by far, but you probably didn't need me to say that.
Bird women.
I'm out of breath, and you're out of time. Now don't you go getting any ideas.
Does not go.
This game isn't perfect though. Saying it's better than the last game is like saying raw Brussels sprouts taste better than moldy broccoli boiled in piss. And it's not a terrible looking game. And while the game is basic, I still had fun playing it. Like Asylum Seeker, it's a product of its time, so some of its flaws are understandable. In the game, they use an X instead of a swastika, which is kind of lame, I think, when you're beating up Nazis. It's a lot more satisfying to beat up a Nazi in a video game if you see swastikas, because that's more immediately recognizable, you know, as like evil. This game is like a worse version of the original God of War. I do love how it was voiced by the actors from the two Del Toro movies though. Ron Perlman, Selma Blair, and Doug Jones all voiced their characters.
And I'm standing on some ugly archipelago in the middle of who knows where, probably Moldavia. But I blacked out for a while, so it could be Albuquerque.
The shooting and throwing objects mechanic isn't very good in this game. You gotta use one of the sticks to aim around the screen, and it's kind of awkward. And every time you shoot, you're forced to reload, so you leave yourself vulnerable. And aiming your thrown objects takes some time because aiming is so dog shit and unpredictable in this game. It is fun to play as Hellboy in this fashion though. It's kind of like a horror version of God of War. You'll fight Lovecraftian monsters and witches and gorillas.
Crap.
Yeah, you fight a lot of gorillas. The grab mechanic in this game is super important. It allows you to regain health by throwing enemies in the air and spiking them back down, and you can use the grab to take weapons away from enemies. It's basically how you interact with everything in the game. So it really sucks that it doesn't work half the time. You'll be walking and slamming that button over and over, but it just won't function. The combat is okay, I guess. There's a light and heavy attack, and you can combo them and charge the heavy. All pretty standard stuff. You can use the Good Samaritan in the game, and there's different ammo types that do different things. Like one freezes the enemy, one shoots an explosive, stuff like that. You can wield random objects from the environment as weapons, and sometimes there'll be like swords and hammers laying around that you can pick up and use. There's a jump attack, and God, the jump is so bad in this game, and it looks so goofy. The enemy variety per level could definitely be better. They force you to fight these tiny, annoying skeleton enemies constantly. Just these non-stop hordes of these annoying fucks. I hate them. Also, the boss fights are either super easy or just annoying. You'll get grabbed for seemingly no reason at all and stun locked, and the environment will box you in or block your camera. And this transition screen proved to me that I'm online too much. All in all, I think the game is decent, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't times when I was having fun. The next and final game is Hellboy Web of Word. It looks like it should be pronounced Web of Weird. I think it's Web of Word, I don't know. It was developed by Upstream Arcade.
They say there ain't no such thing as a good death.
Made in partnership with Dark Horse Comics and Mike Mignola, which is probably why the art style is so faithful to the comics. Playing this literally feels like you're in one of Mike Mignola's stories. So it's pretty cool. It's too bad that the game has a progress resetting issue on the Xbox. I only ran into this issue after I had already beaten the game. Basically what happens is, once you're done playing the game and you switch off the game and play something else, when you return to the game, it's like you're starting over. The entire game resets. It has a problem like saving your progress. It sucks. It definitely ruins the experience if you have to restart every time you play. It's kind of weird when I say that because this game is a roguelike, so you already do have to restart multiple times when you play the game. But it would be nice if you didn't have to restart everything when you close it and return. So yeah, like I said, it's a beat 'em up roguelike that was released in 2023. It kind of reminds me of a more simplistic looking Borderlands. You know, that like cell shaded look. Hellboy is voiced by Lance Reddick.
Guys, I found Lucky.
And he does a great job. May he rest in peace.
He's in bad shape, but Hellboy.
The voice acting all around in this game is awesome.
What the hell?
I wasn't in love with the game's soundtrack. I know what they were going for. It's got this like jazz, detective, noir energy to it.
Might come in useful.
But it wasn't all that enjoyable to listen to for me personally, especially since you have to listen to it over and over and over again. I think it's very important for music to be really awesome in a roguelike because those games are very repetitious in nature. So if you're listening to a song over and over again, it has to be a good song. Like, it just has to be. And the songs in this game just weren't my favorite. Also, the default volume of the music is too loud. Hellboy's running animation in this game is kind of awkward. I'm not a fan of how it zooms in on the character when he runs, so it takes up nearly half the screen. The running animation makes running around the arenas feel unnatural and almost claustrophobic. You're fighting with the camera half the time as much as you are the enemies. Like in most roguelikes, you walk from room to room, defeating hordes of enemies over and over, and you get upgrades as you go. The game doesn't make a great first impression, but the more you play, the more fun it gets. At first, the gameplay feels super clunky and awkward and simplistic. It takes a bit to get used to, especially the dodging. But if you're a Hellboy fan and you play it just enough to start, learning how it works, and you get into the rhythm and the groove of the game, that's when it really shines. The game is kind of similar to Punch-Out or For Honor. You have to learn to recognize what direction an attack is coming from to dodge it. You can also block an attack, and if you perfectly block it, then it fills up a little meter that allows you to do like a super attack. Once you get the timing of the dodges down, this game can be super satisfying to play. Hellboy's punches have a lot of impact behind them. When you stun an enemy, you're allowed to do a super punch on them, and it sends the enemies flying across the arena and does a ton of damage. And the way it's animated is so great. I have to say the lack of a map in this game is kind of annoying. It's surprisingly easy to get lost or turned around in this game, and maybe that's kind of what they were going for, to give the game this like labyrinthian feel, but it isn't very fun walking in circles trying to figure out where you're supposed to go because they'll force you to backtrack through levels sometimes. The game allows you to use 3 weapons, a pistol, a shotgun, and a grenade launcher, but the pistol is so much better than the other guns, so I'm not sure why you can even use the other 2, and you unlock the other 2 later in the game, so it's just kind of strange. The pistol allows you to increase the enemy's stagger meter a lot faster than the other weapons, and that's the most important thing in the game because once their stagger meter is filled, you can give them a super punch, and you want to keep filling their stagger meters over and over. Also, the pistol reloads the fastest. It's just kind of weird. This is one of those games that's not the best, and you kind of know that while you're playing. Like, you know there's other games like this that you could be playing that are much better, but it has a sort of charm to it that's addictive. I like walking around as Hellboy and punching the living shit out of monsters. It feels good. Overall, I mean, it's fine.
And then it took 6 years to get the first movie made. Because it turns out, wanting to make a movie about a red monster with a tail, starring Ron Perlman, is not as easy a sale as you would think it would be.
To get the movie, we wrote the screenplay, we did the designs, and everybody said no. Nobody wanted to green light.
Whenever we were together, I would say, Guillermo, go make the movie with Nick Cage, whoever you have to make it with. Go make it, it's too good a project. But he never intended to do it unless he could do it his way.
And Del Toro called me and said, Blade is #1 at the box office. If they don't say yes to Hellboy now, they never will.
The first Hellboy movie was released in 2004, and it was simply titled Hellboy. It was directed and written by Guillermo del Toro. Yes, the same legend behind Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, Crimson Peak, and Pacific Rim. He also played Deadman in Death Stranding. It has a pretty solid score of 81 on Rotten Tomatoes. Guillermo del Toro won Best Director at the Image Awards, and the movie won Best Makeup at the Saturn Awards. It's been said that producers suggested changing the character of Hellboy, including making him a human man that came back from hell, and more drastically having him be a knockoff Hulk where he only turns into a demonic entity when he gets angry. Del Toro was adamantly against this, as he should be, because doing this would be completely against the character in the comics. According to IMDb, Del Toro chose to direct the film instead of directing Alien vs. Predator and Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, 2 films which came out the same year. I personally think he would have crushed both of those films, but I'm happy he decided to make Hellboy. Del Toro was shooting the movie Mimic when he became enamored with Hellboy comics, going as far as to state that it was the only positive thing that came of that filmmaking experience. Making a live-action adaptation quickly rose to the top of his list, and he always had Ron Perlman in mind for the titular character. Del Toro did encounter difficulty getting funding and studio backing until his success directing Blade 2. Ironically, he turned down directing that film's sequel, Blade Trinity, to make Hellboy. Del Toro actually voiced numerous characters, including Baby Hellboy, Ivan the Corpse, Samael, Cronin,
What are you laughing at, you Nazi son of a...
and the Train Driver.
Sure.
As well as physically appearing in a cameo as a man dressed as a dragon in the scene where Samael attacks civilians. Hellboy creator Mike Mignola also appears in the scene as a man dressed up as a knight. When I was writing the script for this video, the image that they used for this movie on Amazon Prime Video was so bad. It's just a random boring still of John Myers with Abe Sapien in the background. Like, no one cares about this character. Like, where's Hellboy? Something I find interesting about the comic book character versus how he's portrayed in the movies is that in the movies they give him shoulders. In the comics, he has this strange like pear-shaped body and very weak shoulders. They definitely should have tried to remove Ron Perlman's shoulders for the movies. I hate it when movies aren't faithful to the comics. The movie starts with a quote from De Vermi Mystery. Not sure if that's how you pronounce it. In the coldest regions of space, the monstrous entities Ogdru Jihad, the 7 gods of chaos, slumber in their crystal prison, waiting to reclaim Earth and burn the heavens. Ogdru Jihad, in Mike Mignola's Hellboy universe, is the ultimate antagonist. It's this dragon of 7 that's destined to one day bring about Ragnarok, or the end of the world. In this universe, Ragnarok is 2 words, not like in Norse mythology. I don't think there's a moment in the comics when Hellboy ever directly fights one of these dragon monsters. They kind of like just linger there as a warning of what might happen to the world if things aren't done to prevent them from coming. We see Nazis gather in the dark to perform a ritual with sci-fi tech to open a doorway for this Lovecraftian dragon entity to rain chaos on the world. I guess they suspect that it'll pity them and spare them. Good plan, morons. They don't actually say this, but it's still pretty ridiculous. I think Rasputin is just a crazy person who wants to unleash these dragons onto the world. My question is, why are the other Nazis following his lead? Maybe they don't know like the ultimate plan. I think they're just convinced that he's going to like make their rule easier by bringing these godlike dragons down out of the heavens or something. These are the epic Nazis, by the way. They've got the dragon sigil with their swastikas. Anyway, thankfully for them and everyone else on Earth, they fail because the Americans arrive to stop them. One of the Nazis has epic blades that protrude from his arms, like Baraka from Mortal Kombat. One of the main baddies, named Grigory Rasputin, is killed by getting sucked into the portal, but then he's regenerated by Nazis. In the comic, Seed of Destruction, Rasputin and the Nazis are many miles north of Broom and the US troops. Professor Broom is like Hellboy's guardian. He raised him. He's the one that found him when he initially arrived at Earth. In the comics, the Nazis' experiment or ritual just summoned Hellboy where the US troops were located. There wasn't a fight at all, but I get why Guillermo put this fight in the movie because it makes it more entertaining. I should also note that Grigory Rasputin is named after a Russian mystic of the same name that existed in the late 18 and early 1900s. He was given the name Rasputin because of his degenerate and promiscuous behavior as a young adult. The word Rasputin means debauched one in Russian. He went on to become affiliated with religious and occult groups. He did prove himself to have healing capabilities, I guess, or so people thought, and eventually he had the imperial family under his thumb. You can think of him like the evil Russian Jesus. He was a narcissistic, sexual deviant who ruled as a monarch for a while before being killed by being shot and thrown into a lake. A part of his history that Mignola actually uses for his backstory in the comics, only extending his life after his actual death in a paranormal way. At some point, the aptly named baby Hellboy, or Hellbaby, is found by a man named Trevor Bruttenholm. His last name is pronounced Broom, though. He entices Hellboy with a Baby Ruth candy bar after men shoot at him.
Lower your light, you're scaring it.
Lower your light, you're scaring it, Broom says, while holding a light at it himself. One of the soldiers notices Hellboy's huge arm and says, "Look at the size of that whammer!"
Look at the size of that whammer!
Bingo was his name.
All right, you want me to check him out?
Look at the size of that whammer!
Exactly.
The CGI for baby Hellboy isn't incredible, but it was probably good for the time. Del Toro and Mignola both pictured the film utilizing effects similar to that of famed special artist Ray Harryhausen, most well known for his stop-motion animation used in live-action films. I love the way Hellboy looks in this movie. Ron Perlman was perfectly cast for the role. He's already got that thick caveman head. Plop some makeup on him and give him a huge red fist, and bam, you get Hellboy. And his voice is perfect for the character too.
What's with the hair, Clay? Finally got them implants, huh?
I'm very aroused right now.
I too am aroused.
I'm starting to swell up.
You know who also has the look, build, and voice for Hellboy?
Well, actually, yes, I do. It's my mom.
The actor Robert Mallet. I don't know, paint the man red and he's practically Hellboy already. Hellboy's line, "I'll always look this good," to his romantic interest in the film, Liz, was originally said by Del Toro to his to-be wife, when she expressed disdain for his casual dressing style. Ron Perlman went through the nearly 5-hour makeup process to become Hellboy so he could grant a boy's wish who was suffering from leukemia in 2012. I love when actors do stuff like this. I love when they introduce Hellboy when he's older. He's shrouded in shadow, making him appear similar style-wise to his comic book counterpart. They reference the comics in the movie too, which is cute. Abe Sapien, the fish guy's makeup, is extraordinarily good in this movie. It is a Guillermo del Toro movie, so that can be expected. When we see Hellboy go on his first mission, the song Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds is playing. It's just the perfect choice for a song, isn't it? I love Hellboy's fight with this Lovecraftian entity with a million names. It's super fun. The cool thing about Hellboy is that he's a pro at taking a beating. He's also fearless, like I said before. There's a moment when he saves this agent named John Myers from an oncoming SUV by punching it into a flip with his right hand of doom. It's a pretty cool scene. Hellboy is bonked under a moving train. which makes his horns hot to the touch. And then a moment later, he kills this tentacle monster by grabbing a train track, and he's immune to fire, which I guess also accounts for electric shock. Sure, electrocution can and does burn you, but its true deadliness comes from its threat to stop your heart. And Hellboy definitely has a heart, because in the comics, he has it literally ripped out of his body, and it's just weird that he touched his horn and he was like, ooh, it burns. Like, what? Ron Perlman actually broke a rib jumping onto a train coming at him at 45 miles an hour while performing a stunt for the subway sequence. I can't imagine that was a fun day of filming. Earlier, when he shot the creature, he was told by Abe that it can resurrect, but he assumes that the electricity killed it for good. Shouldn't he wait around for a bit first to see if it resurrects again? He doesn't for some reason and just walks away. Later, the Nazis infiltrate some place to cut a container of salt out of a statue. This Nazi ninja guy is named Karl Ruprecht Cronin. He's got really cool swords, and he slices this statue in half like he's Trunks from DBZ. It's very epic. His swords are so sharp. I love his spinny moves with his two arm blades and the ridiculous sound effects that accompany them. He deflects two cops' bullets back at them, killing them, and like 5 other cops shoot at this guy, but they shoot him in the very obviously armored spot on his chest over and over again. Shoot his legs, his arms, his head, I don't know, anywhere else. And then they stand around confused why he's unharmed as he walks up to them nonchalantly and cuts them all down one by one. Why is the cop furthest from him just standing there? Run away, dude. What are you doing? Or die. That works. Rasputin's ghost arrives and uses the salt to resurrect the monster that Hellboy killed earlier. So he probably should have stuck around. Elizabeth Sherman, Hellboy's Firestarter lady friend, doesn't work at the BPRD anymore, and he misses her. Hellboy is impregnated by a slug with 3 eggs, by the way. He's now considered Hell Mommy. Rasputin starts whispering sweet nothings into Liz's ear as she sleeps. Rasputin says, "You must return to the child. Kill the child. Corrupt them all." We learn that Liz was bullied as a kid and then exploded into a giant fireball. Rasputin brings her back to that time in her memory, so it happens again during modern day. She's like this walking thermonuclear bomb or something. Hellboy is a growing boy. He needs 1,000 pancakes a day. And I mean that literally, 1,000 pancakes. Look at that plate, are you kidding me? Maybe a little too many carbs. I mean, that's just a suggestion. Maybe put a piece of broccoli on the top. Funnily enough, there's a Hellboy short story that's literally 2 pages long, simply named Pancakes, wherein Hellboy, as a kid, is fed pancakes for the first time. At first, he doesn't want them, but upon being fed, he loves them. And afterwards, the denizens of hell lament this because now Hellboy has tasted pancakes, so he'll never want to return to hell. We get to see the epic samurai Nazis' CGI eyes, and good lord, they look bad. Why didn't they just find someone with that ability to bulge their eyes out of their skull? You know, like this guy.
Whoa! Whoa!
You know, like in the Mad Max movies? Later, Brum does an autopsy on this guy after Hellboy finds him. He then turns a dial on his chest and dies. Well, he shuts down because Brum learns that it's a robot. Abe is attacked during his underwater mission, and it makes me very sad. I like Abe Sapien, he's cool. As far as amphibious fishmen go, he's all right, you know? He's one of the best ones. This Lovecraftian beast is named Samael or something. So I'll be calling him Sammy. Sammy kills some men and then gets in another fight with Hellboy. I love Hellboy's personality. He's so nonchalant in these insane scenarios.
You can do better than that, big monster like you.
Cracking one-liners while getting his ass beat. It's very reminiscent of the comic book version of the character. You can tell that Guillermo del Toro loved the comics and desperately wanted to bring them to life. For example, this woman cries for her kittens, so Hellboy goes to save them. Sammy shoots his tongue at Hellboy. He grabs it and says, "Nuh-uh, second date, no tongue." I love it, it's so good. And then he flings him around like Mario fighting Bowser. I love it, such a great scene. I also like how in the beginning of the movie, there was one blurry photo taken of Hellboy, which was shown on a talk show, and they comment on how it's weird how all paranormal photographs are blurry. But like, here he is, Hellboy in all his glory among 100 people fighting this monster, and somehow nobody ever captures a good picture of the guy. I don't know, maybe this is the first time he's been out in public like this ever. I don't know. If it were realistic, there'd be like 100 photos of him all over the internet immediately after this happened, and people would be crowding around taking pictures. In this movie, there's this triangle romance subplot between Hellboy, Myers, and Liz. Myers is helping Hellboy by bringing him food, and he knows Hellboy has written around 100 versions of the same love note to Liz. These notes cover the floor. Ridiculous, but whatever. And Myers decides to bring Liz out for coffee? Bruh, what the hell? There are a billion fish in the sea. And Myers decides to go for the only one that the Hellboy is in love with? Not a great plan, my guy. Also, the disrespect. Ugh. Hellboy sneaks around and watches as they go on their date, and he throws a rock at him from a rooftop and hides. I love how this movie isn't trying to take itself super serious, but at the same time, there's some very badass moments. The robot samurai Nazi reawakens. It used its internal clock to kill itself and reawaken after it was brought to their headquarters. That was its plan all along. Rasputin shows up and shows Brum a terrible vision of the future.
And bring about the end.
The samurai Nazi then kills him. Pretty rude. The actor who played Professor Brum, Sir John Hurt, was revealed to have cancer while filming. In the director's cut, they stated that he only had a few months to live. Hurt would later pass away from pancreatic cancer. Rest in peace, he'll always be remembered. I think he did great in this movie.
I won't be around forever, you know.
Liz goes to Abe Sapien for guidance because she's not sure what to do with grieving Hellboy, since, you know, Hellboy loved Professor Brum. And Abe tells her that he isn't much of a problem solver, and proves this by telling her that he's only been able to complete 2 sides of a Rubik's Cube in 3 decades. Bro, at this point, you're hopeless. How dumb could he possibly be? Put the thing down. It's never gonna happen. You'd think he would solve it by just pure chance at this point. Doug Jones filmed his scenes in the medical tank on his birthday. Del Toro wished Jones a happy birthday that morning and proceeded to tell him that today they were going to hang him by his balls. It involved him hanging several hours in a harness made to look like he was floating in water. It was extremely uncomfortable and resulted in some aches, scrapes, and blood when they were finished. A happy birthday indeed. There's a genuinely sweet moment between Liz and Hellboy. He tells her that he understands why she gravitated towards Myers instead of him. You know, because he's a big red monster man with horns. Anyway, and she might be fearful for her life if he ever used his right hand during lovemaking. But yeah, we get to see this vulnerable side to Hellboy. He understands that there's differences between them that are just too weird. But despite that, he promises her that he'll always be there for her. And he just wants her to be happy.
I'll never give up on you.
Man, I love this Hellboy. I can understand why people fell in love with the character after watching this movie. Because before this movie came out, I'm pretty sure the reader base for the comics was very small, and this movie exploded his popularity. While Liz and Hellboy are close in the comics, they never reached this level of intimacy. This sort of relationship reminds me more of Hellboy and Alice's relationship from the Wild Hunt comic run, or his relationship with Anastasia in Hellboy in Love. The BPRD tries to track down the baddies in Russia. Hellboy reanimates a corpse named Ivan and carries him around on his back as a guide through the place, like this undead dude backpack. It's his new pet. Little Ivan, isn't he cute? In the short story, The Corpse, Hellboy also walks around with this dead guy on his back. So this part is probably a nod to that story. Oh, whoops, there he goes. Bye-bye, Ivan. It's time to die again, I guess. Everything is falling apart, and there's traps everywhere. It feels like Hellboy was dropped into an Indiana Jones movie. There's a moment when Hellboy has to run down a bridge that's crumbling beneath him. And I guess Ron Perlman was on cables. And for a moment during this scene, he runs in midair like a cartoon. It's pretty funny. Later, Hellboy and the new BPRD director Tom Manning fight off one of the Nazi ninja robots that love to spin their blades around. He looks very cool. Hellboy manages to throw it into a pit of spikes and then tosses a gigantic gear down on top of it. The way I fucking howled when I saw Hellboy walk into frame with this gigantic, colossal gear out of nowhere. Like, where'd he get that thing?
What are you laughing at, you Nazi son of a...
Turns out Sammy has a big family. Look at this get-together. They're everywhere. Liz, Myers, and the other agents run into their lair. Liz calls for help, so Hellboy, somehow knowing that they're located below him, starts Minecraft digging with his fist downward. No joke, he literally turns into Steve and starts punching the ground until he magically pops out of the ceiling. I love how absurdly fast he digs a giant hole into the ground of this place by just punching down. So he's face to face with all these lizard things. It's brawling time. Hellboy starts fist fighting them all, and yeah, he's fucked. He's kind of outnumbered, but you know, it's just Hellboy style. He runs in, completely fearless, like a moron, tries to take them all on himself, obviously gets overwhelmed, and he's kind of in a shit situation, and by a stroke of luck, something comes out of nowhere and saves him. It's very much in line with the comic book version of the character. So yeah, Liz turns into Phoenix from X-Men and incinerates them all with her powers. She just needs a little smack from Myers to get her internal battery working or something. Hellboy and the rest are taken captive by Rasputin and his Nazi lady friend Ilsa. He's got the Baldur's Gate 3 Gortash fit on. It's kind of silly though, because it's clear as day that his left hand could easily escape the hole that it's in. Rasputin leans over for a wet, sloppy kiss. No! Just kidding, he sucks Liz's soul from her body. The evil Nazis need Hellboy to open this gate thing in order to allow the Ogru Jihad to ascend or something and wipe out all life on Earth. I don't know. So they try to convince him by killing his girlfriend. And he's like, I don't care. You can kill my girlfriend. I'm not giving in. But then he just kind of gives in anyway and decides to help them afterward because he has nothing to live for anymore. Nice. You would think Hellboy should have given in before he did this, but no. So he repeats his true name, Anangun Rama, and unlocks the locks that hold the 7 that make up Ogru Jihad. Hellboy becomes extra horny, and his crown of fire appears. Myers convinces him to press the go back shit go back button. So he rips his big old horns off and kills Rasputin. He does rip his horns off in the comic, but not when he's fighting Rasputin. He does it much later when he's fighting vampires. In the movie, Rasputin then gives birth to a squid baby that has quite the growth spurt, and Hellboy kills it 1 minute later with grenades. In the comic, Rasputin is harpooned through the back by Abe. Mike Mignola did consider featuring Rasputin being stabbed in the belly, resulting in a monster being released upon the world for his Hellboy comic, Seed of Destruction. He never told Del Toro this, so he was shocked to see the exact plot element wind up in the film. So that's pretty cool. Ilsa isn't there, by the way, but Ilsa does love Rasputin in the comic. Maybe a little too much. She willingly encloses herself into an Iron Maiden just because he asks her to do it. He tells her she has to do it in order to ascend life or some mystic bullshit. In the comic, Liz explodes into a fireball, sort of like she does in the movie, and then Abe Sapien dives in and saves her. A tentacle monster called Sadhu Hem appears. Rasputin tries to cut down Hellboy with a sword, but then he decides against the sword at the last second and turns into Dodoria from DBZ and blasts Hellboy with an energy beam that shoots out of his mouth. Hellboy blocks it with his thicky arm and then beats the shit out of him until he's literally a skeleton. And then he crushes his skull, you know, for good measure. In the movie, Liz is dead, but Hellboy knows a secret phrase to bring her back to life. So why was he freaking out before? If he knew he could do this. Well, maybe he wasn't sure he could, but whatever. Liz and Hellboy start making out in a blue flame directly in front of Myers. They don't mind an audience. Get cucked, Myers. 4 years later, we get the sequel, and easily the best Hellboy movie to date. Hellboy 2, The Golden Army! Yes, I'm only making this video so I can show off this shirt. It made nearly double its budget of $80 million during its theatrical release, has an 86% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It won Best Wide Release Film, Best Makeup and Creature Effects, Best Actor for Ron Perlman, and Best Supporting Actor for Doug Jones. This movie was also directed and written by Guillermo del Toro, and it was co-written by Mike Mignola. During the intro, they tell us that Hellboy loves candy and TV. We get to see young Hellboy, and he's got one cracked horn. He's got these Dumbo ears and impressive beaver teeth. I will brush my teeth, I promise, he says. You're gonna need a hairbrush for those chompers, dude. Professor Brum reads him a story about the Elf King Baelor's Golden Army. The short version of the story is this. The human race's insatiable greed led to an endless war between man and the other races. In response, a goblin blacksmith created an unstoppable army of giant mechanical soldiers called the Golden Army. A crown was created, and as long as an elf with royal elf blood wore it, they controlled the army. So the Elf King put on the crown, he controlled the army, and obliterated mankind. He kind of felt bad for humans after doing this, so he called off the army. Afterwards, he divided the crown into 3 pieces. 1 for the humans and 2 for himself. Why would he ever give up the only advantage he had over mankind? I mean, whatever. They formed a truce, humans would keep to their cities, and elves and other magical beings would stay in the forest, for now. Guillermo's love for spinning blades continues in this movie, with the villain Prince Nuwata. He's the son of King Baelor. His look kind of resembles the twins from Matrix Reloaded, or Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 if he grew his hair out. So the prince infiltrates an auction to reclaim an artifact of importance. His goal goal is pretty obvious. He wants to reclaim the crown so he can control the army and obliterate humans because he hates them. Anyway, remember how in the last movie I complained about how many pictures there would be floating around of Hellboy? Well, in this movie, the BPRD director Tom Manning shows Abe Sapien a ton of new photographs that surfaced of Hellboy. And Hellboy even posed for one and gave an autograph. Like, he didn't just disobey these orders. He's leaning into a celebrity. It's pretty funny. Touche, Guillermo.
And gave an autograph.
We get to follow Abe and Manning as they walk through the BPRD, and we get to see an assortment of strange creatures. It kind of reminds me of a similar scene from Men in Black, you know, when they're walking through the facility and you get to see all the aliens from different worlds. Obviously, Ron Perlman is back to reprise his role as Hellboy, and so is Selma Blair as Liz. They're having a heated argument. Liz is pretty upset, so she explodes, which blows the vault door off its hinges and sends it rocketing through the BPRD. It could have easily killed Abe or Manning. Just another day with these volatile superhumans. Hellboy and the BPRD are called in to investigate the crime scene at the auction house. Prince Nuada left behind some tooth fairies, but these aren't your stereotypical tooth fairies, although I'm not entirely sure what a stereotypical tooth fairy would look like. But yeah, you heard that right, tooth fairies, but like the evil kind. Like, these things probably won't leave you a couple quarters underneath your pillow after you lose a tooth. These ones feed on your body, but they tend to go for the teeth. Thank God Hellboy has so much teeth to spare. Abe finds out that Liz is pregnant. He can like sense that she's pregnant with his abilities. She's got a little demon child growing inside her. It turns out that there's thousands of these tooth fairies. And instead of fleeing, the BPRD members start shooting them with guns. Not sure how effective that'll be. You know, it's kind of like trying to gather grains of sand on a beach using tweezers. Why are they trying to shoot them? Whatever. You do you, guys. Even if they did hit a couple of them, it wouldn't stop the other 100 that's buzzing around your head from eating you alive. For some reason, these tooth fairies obliterate one guy. They literally eat him down to the bones. But the other agents are completely unharmed. Not a single tooth eaten. And look at this fool firing his gun into the swarm. What are you doing? Finally, Liz decides it might be a good idea to use her abilities, but not before this one guy is absolutely covered in these fairies. The tooth fairies are very nice. They give him a grace period before trying to kill him or something. Very considerate of them. Liz tells Hellboy to get away from the window so he doesn't get blasted out of one. He hears this, and instead of, you know, moving away from the windows, he decides he was in the mood for a free fall and accepts his fate. The movie tries to tell us they didn't have enough time to move, but like, he did. Maybe he decided it'd be funny for the world to see him again. You know, like, fuck Manning. Let's become famous. We get to see Jimmy Kimmel reporting on him. It's very cute, because I know Jimmy Kimmel. I recognize that guy. You see this goopy, big-headed boy with long fingers? His name is Chamberlain. I love Guillermo del Toro's creativity with creature designs. Pan's Labyrinth comes to mind. Before making this movie, del Toro played around with a few ideas for this installment, including a story featuring the classic Universal monsters, the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, and Dracula. And it would have been appropriate too, because Hellboy does fight things like werewolves and vampires in the comics. We then see Prince Nuada confronting his father, King Baelor. Nuada wants to awaken the Golden Army to crush mankind because of their disrespect and apathy toward nature and the earth as a whole. The king won't allow him to awaken the army because of the inevitable bloodbath that would ensue. Basically, he believes that greed is in mankind's nature, and the elves need to keep their pact and stay in the forests. You know, humans, they're a little fucked up, but what are you gonna do? We can't do much about it. Nuada's just standing there like, well, we could just get rid of them, like all of them. Like, it's kind of difficult not to side with Prince Nuada. He's got a point. Nuada doesn't take no for an answer, so he kills off all of the king's guards, and then the king himself. The king's death is pretty cool. He like turns into a tree. Nuada's sister Nuala has the third piece of the crown, but she keeps it hidden and escapes. She doesn't agree with her brother's bloodthirsty mission. We then get to meet Johann Kraus, the ectoplasmic entity from the comics. He's basically just a free-floating soul in a containment suit. Like, the suit is his body. He has all these strange ghost-like abilities. He can communicate with spirits and control things by projecting his ectoplasmic form into them, and in doing so, he can learn what they know. He uses these abilities on a tooth fairy. In this universe, magical creatures use something called glamour to cloak themselves from humans. The BPRD have these like steampunk goggle type things, which allows them to see through the glamour so they can see the magical creatures as they truly are. And one of them is a dirty old troll named Lucy. She's disguised as an old lady, and she collects stray cats to eat them. It's pretty fucked up. Hellboy confronts her to save the cats and to gain access to the troll market. This is the second movie in a row where Hellboy saved cats. He also owns a bunch of cats back at his place in the BPRD. The dude likes cats, in the movies and in the comics. The troll woman leads them to the door, but she refuses to open it. So we get to see Hellboy deck an old lady in the face so hard that she goes flying about as far as a football field. I'm surprised a cartoon whistle didn't accompany her flying. That Rotten Tomatoes score is starting to make a lot of sense, isn't it? And it turns out they didn't even need the troll lady. Johann Kraus just uses his ectoplasm to open the door easily anyway. The troll market is so cool. It reminds me of like the adult version of Diagon Alley from Harry Potter. You can tell that Guillermo and the team really used this scene to flex their creative juices with monster designs. One such monster is rude to Johann Kraus and Hellboy and refuses to reveal any information about the Tooth Fairy. So Hellboy uppercuts him 50 feet into the air. I love how his problem solving is just, I'll just punch them, I guess. And then he lands in a boiling hot cauldron. Abe Sapien recognizes the royal seal on the elf princess, who's also wandering around the troll market, so he decides to follow her. Meanwhile, Hellboy is smacking the shit out of this talking scrotum with a tumor baby growing out of his right tit. Like there's a literal baby growing out of him. I love this movie, it's so weird. The scrotum, in fear, tells Hellboy all he knows about Prince Nuada breaking the truce. Meanwhile, Princess Nuala obtains a map from this weird Castlehead tree man map creator guy, who kind of gives me the same vibes as those hammerhead aliens from Star Wars. Afterward, Abe Sapien enters the shop. The princess confronts him. Then the huge troll thing that works for the prince shows up and starts fighting Abe. But Abe Sapien is a slippery boy. Look at him slide around. He must be like fighting Spider-Man or Black Panther in Marvel Rivals. Eventually, Hellboy shows up and starts fighting him instead. And it's that typical big guy fights the bigger guy scenario. It starts off pretty funny because Hellboy didn't know about this thing's go-go gadget extendo fist, which ends up leading to the monster's demise, which is pretty funny because in the game Science of Evil, you fight a gorilla with this exact same extendo fist, and in the game you use the fist against the gorilla in order to defeat it. This monster's name is Wink, by the way. Selma Blair's one-eyed dog, Wink, served as inspiration for the namesake for the character Mr. Wink. The design first began as a drawing of Del Toro's and is meant to be a visual antithesis of Hellboy, even sporting a massive mechanical hand. And the movie needs the prince to find out about Wink's death. So why not just invent this random tiny dual-headed spaghetti-haired creature thing? The prince then confronts the group before they can leave, and he pulls out this golden egg. He whispers to the yolk, Green Bean, and he orders it to kill Hellboy. But it needs water to grow, so the bouncing green bean jumps away and finds itself in a sewer. Why didn't the prince just spit on it or piss on it? So it grows into this massive forest god elemental. In order to defeat it, Hellboy needs to bring out the big guns. And I'm not talking about the massive pistol. He brings out the big baby. That's literally what it's called. This handheld grenade launcher thing, it's called the Big Baby. Speaking of babies, Hellboy saves a baby from a car. Later, he's launched in the air by the elemental, so he grabs an electrical wire and swings down with it like he's Tarzan. Shouldn't the baby he's holding be a little fried chicken nugget right now? Hellboy then tosses the baby in the air 30 feet and prepares his gun. He then catches the baby and quips, "You woke up the baby."
You woke up the baby.
Get it? He's also referring to his gun. And he shoots it several feet away from the baby, so the baby is deaf now. And it probably will have back problems for the rest of his life after being tossed in the air like a volleyball. The elemental then stumbles after getting shot, and then, whoa! Hey, yo, is that what I think it is? You cannot tell me that doesn't look like its special reproducing vine, or its giant elemental cock.
Definitely don't want to miss out on 19 inches of elemental.
So then Prince Nuada shows up on the top of the building near Hellboy. He just kind of pops up out of nowhere and says, "Go ahead, kill it. It's the last of its kind." Isn't that what the humans want you to do? That's just so typical of humans, right? To kill off things. By killing this elemental, you're no better than them. I think you're more like us, so you should join us. Don't bend to their destructive nature. Prince Nuada, can you not see what he looks like? The person you're trying to convince is a literal devil man. Anyway, that aside, I think the prince is a bit of a hypocrite too. He must have forgot about the moment when he literally summoned the elemental against Hellboy to become the next Godzilla to fight them all. Did he expect this elemental to wipe out all mankind? If Hellboy failed, humans would just send in tanks and fighter jets, and this thing would die anyway. anyway. So if he's so adamant about preserving life, then why isn't this thing in a sanctuary someplace instead of a golden egg that he carries around just in case he needs this monstrous plant to fight things? Not to mention that if there wasn't a drain there, Hellboy could have just squashed the bean and it would have just died right on the spot. Then Prince Nuada would look like a bit of an idiot, wouldn't he? So Hellboy says, damn, cool story, bro, and shoots the thing dead anyway. I think he probably should have shot the prince instead, but whatever. I know he was right next to him, so like the blast probably would have killed the baby, but sacrifices must be made. Abe and the princess start to flirt. She's got a thing for fish dudes, what can I say? This scene must have been responsible for the seed that grew in Guillermo del Toro's mind that made him make the movie Shape of Water. And you can't convince me otherwise. Liz isn't too sure about her relationship with this half demon, so she needs to think about things. Hellboy's all depressed, and Johann annoys him, so he punches his glass head, breaking it, so the ectoplasm goes flying out. Thinking that he just killed the guy, Hellboy says nonchalantly,
Damn.
Johann, being a living gas, isn't really dead. He just doesn't have a container to live in right now. So he uses the lockers nearby to beat the shit out of Hellboy, and it's such an amazing scene. The creativity in some of these scenes is so fun. In the next scene, Hellboy and Abe start singing a love song together, and it's honestly one of the best scenes in the movie. It's hilarious.
I'm going through.
This movie rules. It's not every day you see a demon dude and a fish man singing together. This movie is equal parts fun, awesome, funny, and goofy. Prince Nuada shows up at the BPRD headquarters, and things get a little complicated. The prince starts fighting Hellboy and eventually stabs him in the abdomen. The spearhead he used is like magical, so when someone tries to remove it, it moves closer to the person's heart. So he's kind of stuck with it inside of him. Abe ends up finding the piece of the Golden Army crown that the princess had hidden away. And then Liz, Abe, Hellboy, and Johann Kraus go searching for Prince Nuada. They meet this goblin dude without legs. He kind of reminds me of the last surviving Dwemer in Morrowind, except he's fatter and less horny. And then there's a scene that definitely feels like a nod to the discovery of the mines of Moria in Lord of the Rings. The goblin brings them to an underground city of ruin, where he introduces them to a super cool looking witch with eyes on its wings. This thing is called the Angel of Death. The voice matches its looks so well.
I've been waiting for you both.
I just love the design of this thing. Doug Jones encountered difficulty while playing the Angel of Death, as he could barely see through the mostly obscuring mask, and could barely stand with the 40-pound wings on his back. The character was originally meant to walk around, but was instead held up by wires and depicted as floating, after Del Toro and crew witnessed the trouble Jones was having just trying to stand upright. He also voiced the Angel of Death, where the eerie final product was a result of Jones recording his lines twice and layering them together.
My heart is filled with dust.
This witch knows Hellboy's true name, and it tells Liz that Hellboy will ultimately bring about the destruction of the world if he's revived. Liz obviously wants him to live, so the witch magically removes the spearhead from Hellboy's body, and Hellboy is saved. Liz tells Hellboy that she's pregnant with his baby. The goblin then leads them further in, where the Golden Army is sleeping. This next part is kinda infuriating. Abe intentionally brought the last piece of the crown here to give it to the prince so he would spare the princess's life. What a moron. Afterward, the Golden Army reawakens. Thank you, Abe Sapien. What kind of chance did he think he would have with the princess if he's, you know, dead? Abe Sapien is astonished to learn that the prince lied to them.
Kill them! He lied to us!
No shit.
So now they all have to fight for their lives against the Golden Army. This army of killer machines are surprisingly vulnerable. At least that's what you think initially when they start fighting them. Hellboy just shoots into their gears and they drop dead. So you're kind of sitting there like, oh, it won't be so bad. They might be able to defeat them all, even though there's like a billion of these things. But then you realize that they have the ability to self-repair basically any damage. And then you're like, oh, so they are screwed. The CGI here has aged pretty well. It's not a terrible looking fight scene, and it's very entertaining. I love how Abe was the one that got them into this mess, and he can't do shit to fight against these things. Hellboy then challenges the prince for a fight to control the army. And since he's technically royalty, because Hellboy's like the prince of hell or something, his biological father is the archdemon Azael, or Azael, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Azael.
So yeah, Hellboy does have the right to challenge Nuada. This fight kind of reminds me of the final duel in Dune. The fight choreography is well done. They dance around these gigantic gears. Prince Nuada loves to jump and spin, and Hellboy even disappears within the gears at one point. Eventually Hellboy wins, but then Prince Nuada, that snake bastard, tries to backstab him when he isn't looking. But since the princess and the prince are bound together, whatever happens to one of them happens to the other, the princess stabs herself to stop the prince. If only she did that earlier, all of this would have been avoided. Abe gets to talk to her for a moment before her death. Poor Abe. I love how the elves turn into this strange wooden wax upon their deaths. Liz then melts the crown, which results in the Golden Army shutting down for good. Liz reveals to Hellboy at the very end of the movie that they're having twins. Overall, I thought it was an incredible movie. Guillermo del Toro definitely went wacko mode making this thing. It was super creative, it's funny, it's fun, it's ridiculous in the best way. It's super over the top, like you would expect from a Hellboy movie. The characters are very likable, the makeup and practical effects were unbelievably good, and even the CGI was decent, and probably amazing for the time. Though the film made more money than its predecessor, its 70.7% drop in box office returns in its second weekend is likely the reason this film did not get the sequel Del Toro and his cast and crew wanted to make. So why did the film suffer from such a drastic drop-off? It dealt with some stiff competition, premiering that weekend alongside The Dark Knight. Inspired by Perlman's reprisal of the character for the Make-A-Wish program in 2012, Del Toro decided to move forward with the third entry in the series. It stayed in development hell for 5 years, as producers and film studios continually turned it down, citing a necessarily large budget as the primary reason. Near the end, Del Toro considered adapting the screenplay into a graphic novel. This idea was nixed by Hellboy creator Mike Mignola, as he wanted to maintain exclusive control over the Hellboy comics. Both Perlman and Del Toro tried various social media campaigns to get reinvigorated interest in the franchise. Del Toro said in 2017 that he would have a meeting with executives Perlman and Mignola if he received 100,000 likes on his corresponding then Twitter post. His campaign was a success, and he indeed stuck to his word and had the meeting, only to follow it up by announcing that, depressingly, a third film was 100% not happening. This was apparently because Mignola agreed to the idea of a reboot, which reportedly retooled Del Toro's Hellboy 3 script into one depicting a new continuity, doing away with elements that were signature to Del Toro's directing and writing style, and supplementing it with a lot of violence and profanity. After the 2019 reboot's financial failure, but prior to the production and release of the second full franchise reboot, Hellboy the Crooked Man, Perlman suggested in 2023 that a third film in the original continuity could still happen. The likelihood of a third part to Del Toro and Perlman's Hellboy saga being produced is extremely unlikely at this point though. Mike Mignola had said the following: "Being able to look back now, I'm very happy about the time I spent with him, Del Toro. We had some adventures, and I just think we've both moved on in different directions. When you work on movies, especially if you're on the movie set, there's so much intensity day in and day out with these people, with the actors, with the director, and then when it's over, it's just over. It's a very strange feeling where you just go, I thought we were friends for life, but I'll never actually see you again. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of where Del Toro and I are. He's just on another planet. I'm very glad I got to know him and work with him back when working on a movie was 5 or 6 guys, and not the career he has now. But we still speak or email occasionally." The Golden Army had a bit of a cliffhanger ending with the reveal of the twins, and then we get the 2019 reboot. This is when things start to go downhill. This movie received a ton of backlash, even before it was released. When this movie was announced, there were a ton of fans of the first 2 movies who were completely against this reboot. Hellboy fans and people who were just introduced to Hellboy had grown to love Del Toro's movies and Ron Perlman as the titular character. So it was one of those scenarios where people kind of already made up their mind before watching the movie that they didn't like it. And it just so happened that when the movie did finally come out, it was ass. It was complete ass. This movie sucked balls, dude. I hate this movie. All right, I don't hate everything about it. It has a few redeeming qualities. In this movie, Hellboy is played by David Arbor, the same man who would go on to play the well-known role as Jim Hopper in Stranger Things, and of course, Alexei from Black Widow, because everybody loved Alexei from Black Widow. If anybody remembers Alexei from Black Widow. You know, like the bumbling buffoon Russian Captain America.
It still fits.
This movie was directed by Neil Marshall, which is a name that I'm not too familiar with. He made the movie The Descent, which I thought was decent, but he's definitely not a heavy hitter in the movie business like Guillermo del Toro. Ian McShane plays Professor Broom in this movie, which isn't terrible casting, by the way.
Shut up.
I quite like Ian McShane. And Mila Jovovich plays Nimue, the Blood Queen. Her character makes an appearance in the Hellboy comic run The Wild Hunt and The Storm and the Fury. I'll be explaining little differences as we go. The budget for this movie was $50 million, and they only grossed $54 million during the theatrical release. And the budget doesn't account for marketing, so yeah, this movie bombed hard. Not a lot of people like this movie.
Are you serious?
Not even a minute into this movie, and I kind of understand why people aren't a fan of it. The cursing.
Known as the Dark Ages. And for fucking good reason.
Now, normally I wouldn't give a shit. I curse pretty often in my personal life, and sometimes cursing in a movie is appropriate and sometimes even necessary and works in the story's favor, but definitely not in Hellboy's case. This character never curses. The only real curse that he says in the comics is damn. I think Hellboy said son of a bitch once in the comics.
Then you're nuts!
Strong cursing like fuck and shit are kind of antithetical to the vibe of Hellboy's character, so whoever decided that that would be a good idea, they probably didn't read a lot of Hellboy.
It is one of those areas where Mike Mignola said after we sort of reworked it, he said he wished he had thought of some of those things when he was writing the comic books.
I do like David Arbor's voice for Hellboy though.
Hey, Dad.
Ian McShane or Professor Broom provide a narration.
Yes, that King Arthur.
They tell us about the antagonist, Vivienne Nimue, or the Queen of Blood. I like how they made her cloak similar to how it is in the source material. It's this stark, bright red. Although in the comics, she mostly always wears a hood. She's kind of mysterious. In the comics, Merlin was in love with Nimue, and years ago, she told him that she'd return his love if he taught her his magic. Afterwards, she betrayed him, and then had him buried in the earth. The witches that she became involved with were so terrified of her that they killed her and severed her into pieces and scattered them. But the pieces kept crawling back to one another. So they placed them all in a box and hid them sealed away deep in a secret hole that's guarded by this giant. In the movie though, King Arthur walks up with Excalibur and cuts her into pieces. They place her pieces into separate boxes and ride them to different corners of the land. So it does kind of make you wonder why in the comics it was so difficult to keep her pieces separate. Whatever. Maybe that's something they were trying to answer in the movie. In the movie, Nimue is betrayed by the witch Gnaida. In Arthurian legend, she was the sister to Merlin. In the movie, Nimue's still talking head is placed into a box, and it screams as Arthur closes it. It's so goofy looking. Throughout this movie, Nimue will talk a lot when she's just a head. She'll be screaming as a head. She'll be talking to people as just a head. It doesn't come across sinister or like creepy. It's just funny. This whole scene in the beginning is incredibly hard to take seriously. I think it's partly to do with Mila Jovovich's acting. Excalibur!
Excalibur!
Like, what is she doing, dude? Before we get too far into the plot, I want to touch on this new Hellboy design because it sucks. He's slightly too muscular, or maybe just too veiny. There isn't a single version of Hellboy out there that has hair on the top of his head, aside from this one. And everybody hates this one. He's wearing bracelets like he's part of a rock band, his teeth don't look right, and his right hand of doom is slightly too big and it hangs down too low, and his contact should be yellow, not red. And later we see that he has a lot of black back hair. Like, they gave this dude a ton of pubes all over his body, just front, back. He's got all sorts of hair all over him. He's a big monkey. And I know he kind of looks like a monkey already with the big jaw, right? And the huge fist. He's got the tail and everything, but he's supposed to be a demon. I don't know. Like, why did they give him so much body hair? It looks so weird.
I was very familiar with Mike's work. You know, I loved his style. And that's one of the things in designing, you know, sort of reimagining, you know, our Hellboy, true to his design aesthetic. But then I thought, you know, let's push this even further and punch hair in. His left arm has, you know, it's got hair punched in it. You know, his right arm certainly is covered, so we didn't need that. Chest has hair on it, his back has hair on it. His tail has hair going down the tail. And I think that extra layer of sort of realism.
Anyway, he wanders into this underground wrestling arena where he attempts to bring back a previous agent of the BPRD. Turns out he's a wrestler that's actually a bat creature or vampire. They end up fighting. Hellboy throws him and he lands on one of the corner poles and it punctures through his abdomen, despite the fact that it isn't sharp enough to do that. Like, he would definitely just bounce off of it. He might break his spine, but he wouldn't get impaled. I should mention that this scene is inspired by the Hellboy short story called Hellboy in Mexico, where he wrestles a bat creature in much the same way. Except in the comics, the crowd is made up of zombies and other monsters. And I think the corner pole is a lot thinner, so it makes more sense that it would get punctured. I don't know. Afterwards, Hellboy is seen grieving his dead partner at a bar, and agents come to pick him up there. They mention they knew where he was because someone tweeted about him.
How'd you find me?
Twitter.
So Twitter is mentioned, which automatically makes this the worst Hellboy movie in existence. Like, you can't make something worse than this. So they travel to the BPRD together. At least they got the BPRD symbol right. This thing? The witch Baba Yaga then informs a beast where to find Nimue's pieces. In the comics, there's this pig creature that wants revenge on Hellboy, so he asks the witches who killed Nimue where her pieces are, and he convinces the lot of them that Nimue could restore their power because it's slowly fading in the comics. And he's like, the only way for you guys to get your power back is to bring back this evil witch that will definitely cause problems for everything and everyone, and definitely you as well. And they're like, you know what? He's right. So they help him. It makes a lot of sense. Next, we see Hellboy introduced to the Osiris Club inside a fancy mansion. In the comics, they reside in ancient ruins, and they tell him about the Wild Hunt. No, not the Wild Hunt from The Witcher. In Hellboy, the Wild Hunt is a hunt for giants. So this part is kind of straight out of the comics, and I think it's pretty cool. Although Hellboy wasn't still part of the BPRD when this happened, and they state in the movie that they can handle 1 or 2 giants, but not 3.
1 we can handle, perhaps even 2, but 3, that's a different matter altogether.
In the comics, they say they can handle up to 3, maybe 4, but they need Hellboy to fight 6. So they made the Osiris homies a bit weaker for the movie. In the comics, Professor Broom was once involved with the Wild Hunt, and they included that in the movie, which is pretty cool. A woman describes Hellboy's origins with Rasputin and the ritual, and during this scene, one of the Nazis, named Klaus Werner von Krupp, is wearing the goofiest 3D Nazi goggles. Like, look at these things. Not that I've seen a lot of Nazi 3D goggles, but this is what that same character looks like in the comics. In this movie, he looks like a parody of the comic book version. Although I love how they included the Nazi hunter Lobster Johnson in this movie. He shows up during the ritual to kill the Nazis. He doesn't do this in the comics, but it's still pretty great. He even brands Rasputin with his claw of justice like he does in the comics. He doesn't brand Rasputin with the Claw of Justice in the comics, but he does brand people with the Claw of Justice. Whatever. Similarly to the first Hellboy movie, Professor Broom and the Americans show up to stop the ritual and find Hellbaby. Except this movie's version of Hellbaby is atrocious. He looks like an oversized plastic demon baby doll. Just... what is that? Hellbaby in the previous movie was goofy looking, but he was also kind of like endearing and cute. Young Hellboy looked a lot closer to his comic book counterpart in the previous movie. In this movie, he just looks awful. And honestly, if I were Professor Broom and I saw this monstrosity, I would shoot it. Hello, Hellbaby. Goodbye, Hellbaby. So remember the pig that seeks revenge against Hellboy? Well, his name is Gruagok of Lo-Lian. I think I pronounced that right, I'm not sure. He is a fairy trapped in the body of an anthropomorphic boar. He's from the comics and he appears in this movie. They first show him killing a bunch of monks in a monastery where the head of the Blood Queen is located. In the comics, he does kill a bunch of people to get here, but there's a giant nearby that opens a deep dark hole where the box is hidden, and he helps them retrieve the box with her body parts inside. In the movie, Gruagok eats the tongue of a monk and uses the monk's voice to open the box that was just sitting there under this monastery. When Hellboy first joins the Osiris Club on the Wild Hunt, the weirdest song ever plays in the background. Like in the comics, the hunters use the Wild Hunt as a ploy to kill Hellboy. They know that he's destined to be King of England. These guys don't want a weird demon man to be King of England, so they take this opportunity to try and kill him. While trying to kill Hellboy, they're attacked and killed by giants. This does happen in the comics, but still, you would think the hunters would want to take care of the giants first and then betray Hellboy, right? Like, why take on both at the same time? Although I think they try and kill him early, but then the giants show up and they're like, oh shit, but I don't know. Gruagok set up Nimue in a random house where she's slowly becoming whole again. As he delivers her pieces back to her, she's like regenerating her body. She's on a couch watching trash TV and she complains about the modern state of the world. This is not what happens in the comics. I hate this part. Why is the Blood Queen watching TV? In the comics, she basically chills on top of a mountain the entire time, and then at the very end, she finds herself in a castle. Hellboy's fight with the giants is fun, but the CGI is a little too obvious and distracting. I've definitely seen worse CGI before. It was far from terrible, but some moments were pretty bad. That and they make Hellboy curse because this is the cool and edgy and adult Hellboy.
It's fucking wet in there.
That's what the fans wanted. That's what they didn't like about the first 2 movies. They wanted him to be cooler. Fuck! More adult. You know, we need blood and guts spilling everywhere. We need him to say, fuck. That would be cool. Let's do that. Needless to say, this doesn't feel like Hellboy at all.
For the record,
This wasn't my idea.
And the worst part about it is that what they did in post was like they filled it full of this really bad CG gore. And I think a lot of people assume it's like, well, that's my hand all over the film, but actually it's not at all.
I like when he uses a broken tree as a javelin though. He does something similar in the short comic book story, The Return of Evie Kolb. He also uses a tree to kill a big monster mutant dog thing in a different short story. Hellboy just likes using sharpened trees to kill things. So this edgy and cool version of Hellboy is kind of a bumbling buffoon in this scene. He fumbles his way through the encounter, and they try to make it simultaneously cool and funny when it really isn't either of those things. There's a part when Hellboy uses one of the giant swords against a giant, and check out how he swings the sword. How the hell did that cut off the giant's left arm? Didn't it look like it should have hit his head or face? Isn't this supposed to be like the edgy and cool version of Hellboy? Show all that gore, dude. After killing the giant, a car shows up out of nowhere, and Hellboy quips, "Is that my Uber?"
Is that my Uber?
One-liner thing that he does, and to make it sort of specific and rich and fun and really come from a psychological place of anger or pushing people away or messing with them or whatever. So yeah, I put a lot of myself into that. It was really important to me.
Turns out this is Alice Monaghan. Fun fact, in the short story The Corpse, the first thing Hellboy did when he saw Alice for the first time was bonk her 3 times in the head with an iron horseshoe. Bam, bam, bam. You see, he saved her from a bunch of fairies as a baby. Fairies in the Hellboy universe have the ability to like camouflage themselves as a human baby. And they use this ability to steal human babies from parents and like swap them out with a fairy. They're like baby thieves. So Hellboy saves Alice as a baby from these fairies. If she were a fairy in disguise, the iron would have burned it, because when fairies are touched with iron, they get burned. They're like allergic to it or something. Gruagach was pretending to be Alice in the beginning of the short story. That's why Gruagach wants revenge on Hellboy, because he burned him with an iron when he was pretending to be a human baby. Later on in the movie, there's a flashback of Hellboy who's wearing a dumb beanie for some reason, and he uses a horseshoe to make Gruagach reveal himself. But in the movie, he's just a younger version of the boar monster. In the comic, he's a fairy, and he's pissed at Hellboy, so he has Grom, this giant locked away under some water, released, because he wants Grom to kill Hellboy. Grom is a giant boar monster, and he ends up snatching and eating Gruagach, so that kind of backfired on him. Hellboy uses a medallion to shrink Grom, and it runs away. Gruagach manages to hijack Grom's now tinier body. In the movie, Gruagach screams at Hellboy, "I'm a little baby, you big fuck! I'm a little baby, you big fuck!" as he squirms in the air. The writing in this movie is truly dreadful. In the movie, baby Gruagach escapes up the chimney, and Hellboy screams after him, threatening him. The way this movie's version of Hellboy is reacting to this situation is completely different than the character Mike Mignola created. Hellboy doesn't act like this. He usually has a very calm demeanor.
You and your little fairy friends are gonna be sorry!
Dumbledore asked calmly.
He doesn't freak out like this. And to know that the filmmakers and writers read the comics, but still wrote him like this, is mind-boggling.
And it was part of the thing in our film, because one of the interesting things to me is that he does have an attraction to the Blood Queen, and it's...
So in the movie, the fairies redeliver the baby because they're afraid of Hellboy's threats, I guess. In the comics, they give back the baby because Hellboy does a job for them. It's more transactional. In the comics, they show a fairy flying away, and he doesn't look anything like Gruagach in this movie. So what? In this movie's logic, he's just a fucked up looking pig fairy, I guess. The monster Grom just doesn't exist. Alice in this movie is played by Sasha Lane. In the comics, Alice is a redhead, so she looks a little bit different in this movie, but that's not really an issue. She's a spirit medium in this movie. I don't think she has powers like those she has in this movie in the comics. I'm pretty sure she's just a regular person in the comics, but they decided to give her superpowers in the movie. Whatever. And there's a romance between her and Hellboy. You might think it's kind of weird that, you know, Hellboy knew her ever since she was literally a baby, and they kind of get romantic with each other later on. But it's a little less weird when you realize that Hellboy doesn't really age. He was a little hell baby. He reached his 30s and then kind of stopped, and he just lives forever now. The actor Daniel Day Kim plays Major Ben Daimyo. In the comics, he's a BPRD agent who's a were-jaguar, which is definitely not a term you hear every day. It was my first time ever hearing about it. A jaguar god spirit inhabits this guy's body, allowing him to transform into a jaguar. But it isn't a mutualistic symbiotic symbiotic relationship. Daimyo isn't too fond of the Jaguar spirit and tries to keep it at bay as much as possible, kind of similar to the Hulk. Also, his face scar in the comics is much worse. Later in the movie, he gives a very brief rundown of the mission that scarred him. Later, Hellboy, Alice, and Ben Daimyo find this psychic named Lady Hatton, and she's murdered in the Osiris Club. Alice then vomits up Lady Hatton's spirit or something so they can briefly talk to her. Are you alright? They ask her. No, a lady just came out of my fucking mouth.
No, a lady just came out of my fucking mouth. It's Leviosa.
I hate this movie, man. So the witches sew Nimue's body back together again, as Gruagok lamented the life he could have had. Man, this would have landed so much harder if we knew that he was a fairy at first, and this isn't his true form or body. It would make his drive for revenge that much more powerful. If you don't know about the comics, all you're thinking at this point is, oh, he's pissed off that Hellboy didn't let him be a human baby.
I'm a little baby, you big fuck!
And he got burned, I guess. Ouch. And then there's this nails against chalkboard scene where Hellboy kind of acts like an annoying teenager. He puts his feet up on Winston Churchill's desk.
Wicked.
And then asks Professor Broom, and then what? Over and over ad nauseum.
Then what? Then what? Then what? And then what? And then. And then.
And then he finally spills his feelings about humans versus magical creatures. He goes on this raging childish tangent about his upbringing and his role at the BPRD. This reinvention of Hellboy sucks so much. This character is meant to be taciturn and cool-headed, not a whiny baby that throws fits. Never once throughout Hellboy's entire arc, even during his earliest moments with the BPRD, he never ever acts like this. He's not a whiny baby that throws fits. In this movie, he's yelling constantly. This tells me that the writers read the comics, but they didn't care to understand the character that they were adapting. Either that or David Harbour was given no direction and didn't read the comics himself, and he just kind of winged it.
Fight against that. Fight against my nature in a weird way.
The answer to every threat we face cannot be annihilation.
Various insiders reported a hostile and troubled set, including the firing of original cinematographer and longtime Neil Marshall collaborator Sam McCurdy, producers meddling with Marshall's direction, Harbour walking off set numerous times after refusing to do more takes for Marshall. Apparently the script was rewritten on set, and Harbour and McShane rewrote a bulk of their lines themselves. So it seems like Harbour might not be blameless when it comes to how infantile and weird Hellboy comes across in this movie.
In fact, I worked with, myself coming up with ideas.
Hellboy then enters an elevator that brings him down to the shaded woods from Dark Souls 2, and out of nowhere comes a mausoleum from Elden Ring that houses the witch Baba Yaga. This scene is pretty cool artistically and thematically. I don't hate the way Baba Yaga looks in this movie. She looks creepy and gross enough, and I like how they included her missing eye. In the comics, Hellboy is responsible for her missing eye. I think he shoots it out or something. The way Baba Yaga introduces herself to Hellboy is probably meant to be scary, but it's honestly just funny. The makeup department did a decent job making her look scary though. After the introduction, this part isn't too bad. The feast and the reveal of human corpses in the back works pretty well, until you realize that this witch is meant to be banished. So where is she finding these human children? Remember how I mentioned earlier in the video that in the comics Baba Yaga made out with a goat? Well, this movie lightly references that by making her make out with Hellboy, and it is disgusting. It's awful. I hate this scene. There's saliva, it's really gross. And I know that's what they're going for, but oh my god, why did they do this? So they end up fighting, and she crawls around with blades like an enemy from BioShock. Later in the movie, they all travel to stop Nimue as she readies her army of monsters. Hellboy walks up the hill and blows her brains out.
Destiny.
She then heals her wounds, opens a portal, and exchanges some words with Hellboy, where he says this.
I'm a Capricorn and you're fucking nuts!
And David Harbour, they couldn't have picked a better guy to play the part,
In the comics, Nimue is locked up in a castle, and there's no way to get to her because of her army that's surrounding it. So Baba Yaga transports him there after he gives her his eye, because he's responsible for her missing eye. So it's kind of transactional again, and it's pretty funny in the comics because she asks him for his eye, and she's like, this is the only way that I'll transport you there. And he's like, all right. He just gives her it. It's just perfect Hellboy, He's so nonchalant, crazy shit will happen around him, and he's just like, damn, that's crazy. All right, guess I have to take care of this now. You know what I mean? And I love that version of Hellboy. That's what makes him so fun and cool. In this movie, though, they just made him a massive red baby. In the comics, after she transports him there, he fights his way to her chamber, and then she transforms into a dragon. In the movie, Nimue heals her wound, and we get to see Alice and Jaguar Man fight in the forest.
Stay behind me.
Where else am I gonna go?
Very riveting stuff. Gnida then tells Hellboy where they can find Merlin so they can save Alice. So they go on this long journey and find him. He saves Alice and then he tells Hellboy who his mother and father are. Merlin presents Hellboy with Excalibur, but upon grabbing the handle, he gets terrifying visions of the future where he's kind of like leading the charge for the apocalypse, so he refuses the sword. In the comics, he does refuse the sword, but not because he gets this crazy vision, but because he rejects his destiny as the King of England. That's not what he wants. He doesn't want to be a king. He doesn't want to be the harbinger of the apocalypse. He doesn't want to rule hell. He just wants to exist. In the movie, Daimyo asks Hellboy, "Where's Gandalf?" He's referring to Merlin. Gotta love those random pop culture references. Later, Gruagach shows up again, bigger this time. I guess Nimue returned him to his true power, which basically just means he's bigger now. In the comics, Nimue tells Gruagach to fuck off, basically, after she gets everything she wants out of him. And he feels like he made the wrong decision in reviving her. And then this dead god of storms basically confirms to him that he majorly fucked up. So he tries to kill himself, but he can't die. Hellboy even comes across his hanging body. Hellboy feels bad for Gruagach, so he empties a clip into Gruagach's body, but he still won't die. Gruagach is doomed to hang there, suffering eternally. The movie version is a lot more action-oriented, which is better for the big screen, I suppose. Hellboy is having some trouble against the boar, so Daimyo decides it's Jaguar time. So Jaguar Man and Hellboy fight off this giant boar that looks like CGI scrambled eggs. Hilariously, Nimue shows up and shrinks Gruagach until he's so small, he explodes? All right. Nimue is desperate to work side by side with Hellboy so they can bring about the apocalypse together. So she shows the sword to him again and she's like, "Are you sure? Excalibur's pretty cool, isn't it?" And he's like, "Nah." So she brings Professor Brum out of nowhere and slits his throat in front of Hellboy. That's one way to get what you want. Except why the hell would he ever do what you ask him to do after doing this? But whatever. In the comic books, Hellboy does take up the sword very briefly. He then gives it to Alice because he doesn't want anything to do with it, and he believes he can take down Nimue without it. In the comics, whoever wields the sword will be able to command the ancient dead of England as their new king. In the movie, the sword lights a flame, and Hellboy's horns grow back, and this floating crown of flame appears above his head like it does in the comics, and then he roars like a lion for some reason. Why'd he do that?
It's a lot more dramatic than in the comic books as well.
So that was embarrassing. I think the idea is that he's losing his humanity and becoming more like a beast or something, but I hated it. He's not supposed to be a beast. He's a demon slash human. He's a demon slash witch, right? Because his mom was a witch, his dad was a demon. Either way, he's a half demon. He's not like a lion or a monkey or a gorilla or a beast. So he took the sword because he wants to use it to kill Nimue. For some reason, the movie changed what army the sword gives rise to. In the movie, whoever has the sword can control the demons of hell. I have to admit, when the demons rise up out of hell, they're pretty cool looking. They are mostly just CGI demons, but I don't know. I thought they were pretty neat. It just doesn't make any sense. He's not reclaiming his throne in hell by taking King Arthur's sword. Whatever. Nimue then bows to Hellboy, which is completely unlike her comic book counterpart. Not to mention, earlier in this movie, she released a plague, and it was pretty clear that she was going to accomplish these things herself, like in the comics. She didn't need help. Anyway, I guess she needed Hellboy all along. Could have fooled me.
I do feel like, to a certain degree, it's closer to the Mignola comic.
Alice then uses her random spirit throw-up ability so that CGI Professor Brum can goop spirit slug out of her mouth to try and convince Hellboy that maybe destroying the entire world isn't the right call to make. So he slices off Nimue's head, and in a hilarious edit, her flying head screams in disbelief, and then Hellboy screams, "Oh my god, I hate it." And then all the demons are sent back to hell. Hellboy rips his horns off, kind of like he does in the comics. He picks up Nimue's head that continues to blabber on. Hellboy quips, "Quit while you're ahead."
Quit while you're ahead.
No! You guys get it? It's pretty funny because she's ahead.
Quit while you're...
So then he tosses the head into the magma below. We get another incredible edit of her head screaming as it falls. At the end of the movie, we get a great view of Hellboy's crazy back hair. Like, god damn, dude, get yourself a wax or something. And his left contact is off center or something, and it makes his eyes look so dumb, but I guess nobody noticed this while filming. Alice's CGI spirit throw-up shit is still active, so Hellboy talks to Professor Brum very briefly. They exchange some words. Hellboy is like, "Please don't go." Like, please remain a fucking spirit throw-up thing forever, I guess.
Shut up.
And Professor Broom's like, no, I have to go. I have to leave now. I'm going to heaven or something.
Shut up.
But like, can't Alice just puke him up whenever she wants to? Or maybe she can't do that after his spirit has ascended. I don't know. Whatever, I don't care.
Shut up.
The movie ends with a BPRD mission with Alice, Hellboy, and Daimyo. Just look at the CGI for this Jaguar man. His transformation looks horrendous. Daimyo's character felt a bit shoehorned in and unnecessary in this movie, if I'm honest.
Either the heart or the brain.
Also, in the comics, Alice never joined the BPRD. In the movie, they find Abe Sapien at the end. Very epic, because we all know that guy from the previous better movies. This movie introduces a billion characters. What's one more at the very end? This movie tries to do a lot. The writers attempt to like twist the narrative in the comics. They try to simplify everything and cram it into a single movie. It just doesn't work. There's simply too many characters to introduce and too many random events in an attempt to make it feel like a fun adventure. Not to say there aren't any fun moments, because there are, but as a collective, this movie fails miserably. The post-credit scene shows Hellboy next to Professor Broom's grave, and he's drinking. He's very sad. Randomly, Lobster Johnson shows up to give him some words of wisdom. Hellboy screams like a toddler. I love you, Lobster Johnson.
I love you, Lobster Johnson!
Oh, somebody kill me, please! Like a spastic 10-year-old or something. And then he says, wow, okay, so that just happened.
All right, that happened.
Yeah, okay, that is something I do now.
This is the type of awful movie that people reference when they see a terrible script nowadays. You know what I mean? Like, this is that movie that people don't want to see again. This script is unbelievably bad. The writer for this movie fumbled so painfully. What were they thinking with this guy? His name is Andrew Cosby, and ever since this movie, it isn't really hard to see why he isn't in the business anymore. The director Neil Marshall has gone on record several times stating how much he hates Hellboy 2019. Apparently he gets tattoos of every movie he writes and directs, but he didn't get one for Hellboy.
It was shit.
He has said that he was completely overruled on everything. He didn't have control over any aspect of the film.
I was completely like overruled on everything.
And that there was none of him in this movie. And he was just going through the motions, right? It was even reported that director Marshall and producer Lloyd Levin could not agree on the asymmetrical design, which Marshall wanted, of a tree, with Levin reportedly overriding Marshall, leading to the latter changing the design in post-production.
And I would have all creative control kind of taken away from me. To extreme levels.
He calls it the worst professional experience of his life, and that they pitched him the horror version of Hellboy, and since he had made good horror movies in the past, he signed on. He ended up hating the script, but had to film it anyway.
For a start, the script was shit.
You would think that he would read the script before signing on to the movie, whatever.
The only film that I've made that I didn't write. I won't make that mistake again.
I kind of get everything he's saying, but the way Hellboy is portrayed in the movie has to be partially his fault, right? Like, Hellboy in this movie isn't Hellboy. He definitely shares some of the blame, regardless of everything else. So yeah, that's the 2019 reboot. What do I think of it? I hate it. It sucks. It's ass. If I had to compliment it in some way, the makeup, the costumes, the character design, some of those were cool.
If my face could talk, it would disagree with you.
But overall, it's super disjointed. It doesn't make any sense. I can't even imagine what you would think as a viewer if you hadn't read the comics. You would be super confused. There's just so much random shit happening in this movie, and the conclusion is extremely silly. The third act feels extremely rushed, and a lot of the moments that they intended to be serious and brooding and deep and cool just come across hilarious and stupid. So I guess it's kind of a fun movie to laugh at. Anyway, let's talk about The Crooked Man. So remember when I said Hellboy 2019 was supposed to be like the horror version of Hellboy, and it completely failed at that? Well, Hellboy The Crooked Man is kind of like the second attempt at making the horror version of Hellboy. This is the real Hellboy horror movie. It was directed by Brian Taylor, the same mad lad behind the Crank movies, as well as that absolutely bonkers Nicolas Cage movie Mom and Dad. I made a video on that movie a long time ago. Sawzall.
It's a sawzall.
It saws all.
That means it saws all.
He also made the movie Gamer, which is an epic movie. I might make a video on that movie eventually. So yeah, this guy's made some legendary movies. So clearly this movie is going to be just as good. So this movie is kind of weird. It's separated into chapters. They definitely didn't have to separate this movie into chapters. First of all, it's not long enough of a movie to require chapters. And second of all, when you do this, you slow the pacing of the movie to a halt. It's only really beneficial to do this when there's very distinct chapters in the movie. In this movie's case, it just felt like they did it because, you know, it'd be cool to add chapters, so why not? The movie is also very dull and dead looking, but at the same time, it sets this dark tone to match, you know, things like witchcraft and the occult. So it is appropriate. But if you're the type of person that loves a lot of color, this movie will not deliver. But I have to be honest, this movie did make me kind of miss the bright, vibrant colors from the Del Toro movies. So this one begins with Hellboy fighting a big and terrible looking CGI spider. He's on this train with a BPRD agent named Bobby Joe Song. Their section of the train gets derailed and tumbles down a mountainside. Hellboy and his colleague Joe are next seen outside of the train tumbling down the mountain. Both of them are unharmed. Kind of weird. The spider escapes by shrinking itself and going down a drain. It's like a magical mystery spider. Bobby Joe Song is an original character for this movie. I'm not sure why they didn't just use the character Susan Jong from the comics. In the comics, she's a former FBI agent that is now working for the BPRD, and she shows up in multiple Hellboy short stories. Hellboy chain smokes cigarettes in this movie. He does smoke cigarettes in the comics sometimes. I much prefer it when he smokes a cigar. They're just cooler, I think. I don't know. They just fit his overall look better because, you know, he's a big guy. He's got a big fist. He uses a big gun. Why would he smoke cigarettes when cigars just feel a lot more appropriate?
Don't like it, but I don't care.
This is definitely real, by the way. It's supposed to blow smoke, kind of. As far as Hellboy's look in this movie, I think it's slightly better than the 2019 Hellboy, but not nearly as good as Perlman's. I think his horn stumps are slightly too big, and his body's muscle suit looks a little fake to me, and his jaw isn't thick enough. He needs that giant Chad underbite, you know? I do like Jack Kesey's voice for Hellboy, though.
The Lord. The Lord have mercy.
Unfortunately, they make him say fuck in this movie as well.
Fucking witch balls.
It's weird every time, and I think they should have given him yellow contacts, but they just didn't. Maybe they thought it would make him look too cartoonish, but he's already like a half devil man, so... Their original mission was to deliver this spider to the BPRD, but since they lost the spider, they're like, well, shit, I guess let's see what's going on with these random hicks in the boonies. So Hellboy and Joe wander the forest until they come across a cabin. Inside, they're introduced to a sick kid who has a strange mark on his neck. They reckon that he's been witched, since they find a witch ball near the doorstep. And a witch ball nearby is a sign that you've been bewitched. Because, like, I don't know, they're created by witches.
Witched?
So then we see this old witch, Grammy Oakham, and she teaches the viewer how to make a witch ball. It's really quite simple. All you need is some weasel blood, a tail of rat, the guts and bladder of a black cat, buzzard eggs and baby's nails, the foot of a toad frog, brain of bat. Once you have the ingredients, you dance around naked, boil all of them in a pot. Once it all congeals together into this goopy substance, you rip some hair out of your head and your pubes, and you wrap the goods into a ball, and there you go. You got yourself a witch ball. What would you say if I told you the movie lied? There's extra steps that they didn't mention. In the comics, in order to make a witch ball, it has to be Friday the 13th, and there has to be 13 of you to make them correctly. There's gotta be like 13 witches dancing around naked, I guess. You gotta meet at a crossroads near a graveyard and bring the ingredients there. Only then can you start to boil the ingredients in a large fire, you know, dance around naked, like I said. Use your pubes to wrap the witch ball, except the comic doesn't mention hair from your privates, only from your head. So Brian Taylor thought that pubes had to be used. Interesting. That's a very Brian Taylor decision, I think. They suspect someone named Cora Fisher is behind the witching, because she's a known witch in the area. So Hellboy and Joe travel with Tom Farrell to inspect her place. There they find a bunch of witch-related ingredients and materials, as well as an additional witch ball. They also find her empty skin on a bed. You know that anti-marijuana ad of like the woman's skin hanging on the couch? You can kind of imagine the same thing, but like just laying on a bed instead. It's just her skin lying there. So far, they're following the comic book short story The Crooked Man pretty well, aside from the whole thing in the beginning with the spider and the train. This guy named Tom Farrell tells Hellboy his story. He tells him when he was younger he met the Crooked Man, and at that time his name was Mr. Anselm.
Mr. Anselm.
In the comic, his name is Jeremiah Whitkins. It's pretty weird that they changed his name, especially since I think the name Jeremiah Whitkins sounds a lot better than Anselm. I did notice that a lot of the dialogue in this movie is ripped straight from the short story.
What do you make of this?
Tom Farrell has a lucky bone. He got it from a cat that he boiled when he was younger, and he swears it kept him alive when he went away to join the army. He boiled the cat alive when he was younger because he was dumb and he wanted to become a witch or something. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, but he was told that the bone that he was holding when the Crooked Man showed up would end up being a lucky bone. So a raccoon enters Cora Fisher's home and shoves itself into her skin through her mouth. So this raccoon starts to fill her body again. This actually happens in the comics, by the way. She did transform into a raccoon and come back and refill her skin. Effie Kolb then comes out of nowhere, riding a horse that turns out to be Tom Farrell's father, who she had been torturing for years. She delivers him back to Tom Farrell to die. Pretty cruel. But at the same time, she could have just kept him, made it so Tom Farrell never got to see his dad again. It's cruel, but at the same time, it's like kind of nice. At least you got to say goodbye. Hellboy says radioactive as she flies away.
Radioactive.
Why do I always think of the Imagine Dragons song whenever someone says that word? I'm cursed. During one scene, you can see one of Hellboy's fake sideburns peeling off at the bottom. At least it looks like it's peeling off. Why didn't they fix it? Cora Fisher is then cursed by the witches. A snake appears writhing around her body. It enters and exits her body multiple times before attacking her. It's pretty disgusting to imagine how this is happening. Hellboy saves her, but he gets bit in the process. Of course, the snake CGI is mediocre and distractingly noticeable, and I wasn't a fan of that. Something similar happens to Cora Fisher in the comic. A huge centipede thing comes out of her mouth, and then she explodes into a bunch of creepy crawlies. In the movie, Hellboy passes out from the venom and wakes up in front of a church. He follows Cora inside, where a big fucking bird shows up.
It's a big fucking bird.
And sets a witch named Sarah on fire. This is Hellboy's mother. Remember how I said Hellboy's mother was a witch? It's kind of a way to connect this story with Hellboy's origin, although they don't really do that in the comic. Tom Farrell uses his lucky bone to find Cora, who then promptly vanishes again, so not really sure it was all that useful. Eventually, they find themselves at a church. They went there so Tom could bury his father's body. Inside stands a lonely blind reverend. I gotta say the casting for this movie was pretty spot on, as far as the original story is concerned anyway. I love who they chose for the reverend. His name is Reverend Watts, and this guy played the part perfectly.
Yep.
So witches show up outside the church, and nighttime descends on them faster than it should. Both of these things happen in the comic. There's something so fulfilling watching stuff happen in live action that you've read in a comic book before. Now I kind of understand what those Marvel kids were feeling. So the witches shake the church with their powers or something. They can't enter a place of worship because of their wickedness, and they're trying to force them out. Hellboy then says this in response.
Elvis's ass don't shake this hard.
Are you sure about that? How you like this? Yeah, Elvis can shake it. Effie Kolb shows up and taunts Tom Farrell, and then the Crooked Man shows up to collect the lucky bone. This short story is a strange one to adapt into a movie because Hellboy is more of a supporting character in this short story. This is very much Tom Farrell's story, not Hellboy's. When they're taking dialogue straight from the comic, it works. But other times they'll write additional dialogue for Hellboy to make him more involved in the story, and most of it is just bad.
I am the heebie-jeebies.
Hellboy stops Tom from handing over the lucky bone and says this to the Crooked Man.
You want it too bad, and that makes me not want you to have it.
He obviously didn't say that in the comic, and I get that Hellboy isn't supposed to be an intellectual.
Why does this book have so many words?
But that sentence is just so bad. You want it too bad, and that makes me not want you to have it. Oh, really, Hellboy? What they did get right in this movie, though, is Hellboy's overall demeanor. He's fearless and he's serious in this movie, but he's not afraid to crack a simple joke here and there, but he's mostly very taciturn, which is much more in line with the original character. And this makes me like him a lot more than in 2019's Hellboy. I like the way Brian Taylor decided to film the Crooked Man's reveal from this like top-down awkward perspective above his hat, showing just enough to make him creepy. I also like the way they made the Crooked Man look. He looks very faithful to how he looks in the comic. They even have him shoot fence pieces into Hellboy like he does in the comic, which I thought was very cool. In the movie, Hellboy says, "Wanna stick your finger in?"
You want to stick your finger in?
To Joe in reference to his wounds, and then follows that up with, "I can't wait to get my hands on that howdy doody fuck."
Can't wait to get my hands on that howdy-doody fuck.
Incredible writing for our big red boy. The Crooked Man tries to buy Tom from the Reverend with gold, time, his eyesight, and lust, but the Reverend refuses. So the Crooked Man reanimates a bunch of dead people from their graves, calling out and using their sins to reanimate each one of which is Tom Farrell's father. There's a scene when the Reverend talks about how he's fired up about the lucky bone.
I'm all fired up.
It's kind of weird.
I'm gonna bust that evil wide open.
He's getting a little too excited about
I'm gonna squeeze it.
this bone, but he does kind of do the same thing in the comics. I don't know. The Reverend likes Lucky Bones. I was wondering when the shovel of Christ would come into play, because in the book there's this goofy shovel that the Reverend like draws a cross on, and they use it against the Crooked Man. And by God, the crazy bastard actually put that in. I do like how they included a line in the movie about how the shovel was used to bury every person on these consecrated grounds.
Every grave in this yard's been dug with this shovel.
And by doing so, it's naturally imbued with holy powers.
If it ain't for the guy, then nothing is.
I thought that was a cute addition that wasn't in the comic. Hellboy takes this shovel and uses it against the Crooked Man. He like rushes out with the shovel and swings it at him or something. There's a big explosion of light and daylight returns. The third act of this movie gets quite messy. It's all over the place. Because up to this point, I thought it was decent enough. Hellboy and Tom Farrell go to the Crooked Man's mansion up on a part of the mountain called the Hurricane. They go there to permanently put an end to things. Jo stays behind with the Reverend. She remembers something about how there's a mining network nearby. She believes that the Crooked Man is using the mines as his power source, which is a bit of a stretch, but whatever. Sure. In the comic, they do explain that this area has old mines and they're filled with witches. I wish they added that tidbit earlier in the movie so the mines didn't feel like they just sprung up out of nowhere. And in this movie, they're not filled with witches. So the Reverend and Jo go down into the mines. There's this extremely goofy hatch in the church that leads down into the mines. And the explanation for it is that the mines are evil and the church needed a literal connection to the mines in order to harness this like holy blockade so the evil can't escape or some bullshit. So yeah, the Reverend and Jo go down into the mines. Like, why the fuck is this Reverend going down into the mines? Meanwhile, Hellboy's mind is taken over by some evil power. He ends up visiting his witch mama, and they exchange some words. He's bewitched by a spell that's meant to make him off himself. Tom is visited again by the witch baddie Effie Kolb, who he comically fights off with his tiny bone. That sounded weird to say, but it's actually what happens. It's a very hard scene to take seriously. I'm not sure what they should have done, but watching him use this tiny glowing bone to fight off a witch, I don't know, man. It's just stupid. The Reverend is killed by a flock of crows in the mines. Jo finds the big spider down there from the beginning of the movie. She starts reciting a prayer that she remembers from her childhood, and with a bright light, it defeats the spider. Later, her flashlight is about to go out, but then the Reverend's soul or something comes out of nowhere and saves her. Whatever. I hated this random plot thread. Like, why is she even in this movie? Oh my God. I think it would have been a lot better if the Reverend was just killed during the church scene and Hellboy went down and saved Jo at the end of the movie. And you know, if he saved her and it turned into this whole knight in shining armor type of thing, then maybe her affection towards him at the end of the movie might be a little more believable. Like, have the spider wrap her up in webbing or something, and then Hellboy can come down and squish the damn thing and save her. I don't know. Further into the mansion, Hellboy discovers the Crooked Man. He's in the shadows eating something. Question mark. I don't know what he's eating. Jo finds out that the Reverend is still alive. Huh? What? Hellboy gets into a fight with the Crooked Man. He gets tossed around the place like a rag doll. The Crooked Man pukes bugs on Hellboy. I gotta hand it to the movie. It's pretty gross, pretty creepy. In the comic book, this part doesn't exist. In the short story, the Crooked Man is all but defeated after being hit with the Jesus shovel. But I understand that the short story is, you know, very short. So it'd be kind of hard to make a feature film out of it. So it makes sense that they would have to add some things here and there. In the comic, when they find him, he's like a pile of goop and bones. He's guarding some treasure that he's accumulated over time from other poor souls like Tom Farrell. The lucky bone is then used to vanquish him. In the movie, Tom throws Cora Fisher's witch ball at him. It's a great pitch. It lands in his fucking mouth. And it poisons him from within. Hellboy blows his fucking head off. It explodes with coins like they defeated an evil ex from Scott Pilgrim.
Sweet. Coins.
I think Jo was shoehorned into the story because Hellboy sometimes travels around with a woman companion in the comic books, whether it be Liz or Alice, so it felt kind of natural to do so. But her inclusion in the movie wasn't justified. She didn't feel all that necessary. If anything, the scene in the mines kind of felt pointless, and I don't think she added all that much to the plot. She mostly just existed as someone for Hellboy to communicate with, but that could have easily just been Tom Fisher instead. I don't think they had all that much chemistry either, and at the end of the movie when she rests her head on his shoulder in the helicopter, I wasn't convinced this moment was earned. I wish they put the witches in the mines like they're supposed to be instead of birds. unless the birds were supposed to be the witches, which I guess could be the case. But still, I think it would have been better if the witches were old hags in the dark instead. At the end of the movie, it's hinted that Jo can see the Reverend sitting on the pews in the church, but Hellboy can't because of her connection with him in the mines or whatever. This is silly because Hellboy has more conversations with dead people and spirits throughout the comic books than he does with the living. This dude talks to skeletons and ghosts all day. They definitely should have made it so he could see him too. Or maybe he can see him, but we can't, whatever. They do find Effie Kolb later when the Crooked Man is dead, and she's an old woman now, before she used her powers to look like a baddie. Which makes me wonder why the rest of the witches didn't do that. How come they're not all, you know, hot bitches? Just like in the comics, Tom fastens a bridle to her, and she transforms into a horse. Does that mean if you put a collar on her neck, she would transform into a dog? It just seems kind of random. Anyway, they paint "Beware I am a witch" on its side before leaving her there. Hilariously, this does happen in the book. I think this movie was a bit too dark at times. It was hard to see what was happening, but I did like the use of shadows and lighting to convey a sense of dread. This movie definitely had a haunting aura, and I think it's obvious that's the type of tone that Brian Taylor was going for. So yeah, I think Brian Taylor accomplished that horror movie tone a lot more than 2019's Hellboy. I think fans of the comics will get a lot more out of this movie than people who haven't read them, but honestly, I was expecting worse. This movie has its moments, and I'm honestly kind of a fan of this one, but mostly because I just love Hellboy. Someone who doesn't care that much about the character will not get a lot out of this movie. This Hellboy is a lot better than the version from 2019. Jack Kesey did a decent job in the role, and the camera work was solid. The makeup was well done, and honestly, it's haunting at times. There were a couple of goofy scenes, and I didn't love Joe's inclusion, like I said.
Dark as the devil's asshole.
But still, I'm happy that I didn't completely hate it like I was expecting to. Apparently this is Mignola's favorite Hellboy story. Maybe he just means like short story.
My favorite Hellboy stories are the ones where his life was kind of uncomplicated and he just stumbled into other people's problems.
Because I think the original Hellboy run is just better in every way. I still like The Crooked Man. And I thought the movie was fun. Not perfect in any way, but still pretty good. That's it, guys. That's all I have to say about Hellboy. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. The watch time is definitely appreciated, and I hope you liked it. If you'd like to support the channel so I can make more thorough and huge projects like this, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. If Patreon isn't your thing, then you can also support me by getting something over at alienclothing.com. This year, we're taking the brand in a different direction. We're releasing clothes based on different movies and games that I love. There's a possibility that you might like something over there. That's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Peace.